She came to clean his mansion, but ended up cleaning up his entire life. Denise didn't even take her shoes off. The second she stepped into that massive house on Westridge Drive in Scottsdale, Arizona, something felt off. Not wrong, just off. The kind of silence that didn't belong in a home with a baby. No voices, no footsteps, no sound of toys clinking around on the floor, just the hollow echo of her own keys hitting the marble counter. She looked around, instinctively calling out, "Hello?" Nothing. It was supposed to be a simple Thursday job. Deep clean the kitchen, wipe down the living room, vacuum the stairs, and maybe mop the foyer if she had time left over. The nanny was usually there, some young girl who barely spoke to Denise, except to say where to put the trash bags. But today, the girl's purse wasn't on the table. Her coat wasn't on the rack. Weird. Denise pulled her braids into a bun and tied the old red bandana around her head. She slipped on the yellow gloves from her tote, ready to get to work, when she heard it. A cry. High-pitched, sharp, desperate. It came from upstairs. One cry, then another, then a string of sobs so strong it made Denise stop in her tracks. She hesitated, not because she didn't care, but because in a house like this, white stone walls, $30,000 rugs, smart speakers in every corner, you didn't just go walking upstairs like you lived there. Even after 3 months on the job, she never touched what she didn't need to. But this was a baby crying with everything he had. So Denise climbed the stairs, slowly, carefully, past the expensive art and down the long hallway. The cries led her to the nursery. The door was open just a crack. She pushed gently. There he was, Caleb, red in the face, little fists balled tight, tears soaking the front of his onesie. No blanket, no pacifier, no one in sight. She stepped in. "Oh, baby. Hey now, what's wrong?" she said, her voice soft. He didn't stop crying, but his eyes found hers, and something in that stare, wide, wet, terrified, hit her right in the chest. Without thinking, Denise picked him up. He was warm, a little damp. His diaper sagged. She swayed gently, rocking from foot to foot like she used to with her own son when he was this small. "It's okay now. You're all right," she whispered, rubbing his back. "Somebody forgot about you, huh?" Caleb buried his face into her shoulder. Slowly, the cries turned into little hiccups. Then nothing, just quiet breathing and the occasional sniffle. She looked around. No bottles, no toys on the floor, no nanny cam blinking in the corner, just a closed diaper bag, an empty crib, and a half-drunk bottle on the windowsill that looked like it had been there a while. Denise shook her head. "Where the hell is the person supposed to be watching you?" She didn't mean to say it out loud, but Caleb couldn't answer, and the silence was too loud. Then, a sound behind her, the faint shift of footsteps. She turned, and there he was. But the man standing in the doorway wasn't the nanny. He was the one signing her paychecks. And he'd just seen a stranger holding his son like she belonged there. Elliot Vaughn didn't speak at first. He just stood there, one hand still on the doorframe, wearing a gray Henley and jeans like he hadn't even planned to be home today. His eyes weren't angry, just wide, confused, watching. Denise froze. Caleb's breath was still steady on her shoulder. She held him, but her arms suddenly felt stiff. I didn't see anyone up here," she said quickly. "He was screaming, alone. Elliot blinked like he was waking up from a long nap. "No one was here?" he asked. "Not a soul," she replied. He stepped into the room, slow and quiet. His eyes flicked toward the crib, the diaper bag, the bottle on the windowsill. Then they dropped to the baby, his baby, still clinging to Denise like they'd known each other forever. "I thought the nanny was scheduled all day," he said, more to himself than her. Denise didn't move. She didn't want to make it worse. She just kept swaying gently, keeping Caleb calm. "I didn't touch anything, just him. He was crying so hard," she said. Elliot gave a slight nod, but his face stayed unreadable. He reached out a hand like he was about to take Caleb, then stopped. The baby let out a tiny whimper at the shift. Denise adjusted him gently and looked up. "I think he's hungry," she said, "and soaked. Diaper's been full a while." Elliot exhaled slowly, then turned to the changing table. He opened a drawer and pulled out a diaper with shaky hands. "You want me to?" Denise offered, already knowing the answer. He gave a half shrug. "Yeah, please. Yeah." She laid Caleb down on the soft mat and changed him like it was second nature. Cleaned him, dressed him in a new onesie, all while Elliot watched. "You do this often?" he asked, almost like he was ashamed of the question. She smiled. "I have a son. He's 17 now, but yeah, I've changed a few diapers in my life." 17? he asked, eyes widening. Denise nodded. Started early. Did what I had to do." Elliot sat down on the edge of the rocker and rubbed his temples. "This nanny, she said she was reliable. I pay her more than I probably should." Denise didn't respond right away. She was busy feeding Caleb now, holding the bottle carefully, wiping his little chin when the milk dribbled. Elliot watched her quietly. His voice came low, almost like it wasn't meant to be heard. "He never calms like that, not even with me." She glanced at him but said nothing. "I'm not good at this," he continued. "The parenting thing. My wife, she passed last year. I built this house with her. We were supposed to raise him together." Denise finally looked at him fully. "I'm sorry," she said, and she meant it. He nodded again. "I've thrown money at everything. Daycares, sleep consultants, nannies. Nothing works. He just cries and cries. And He stopped himself, shook his head. "I'm sorry you had to walk into this." Denise let out a breath. "He's a baby. Babies cry, but they also know who's holding them and who isn't." The words hung in the air for a second too long. Elliot stared at the floor. Caleb finished the bottle and curled into Denise's chest like he was ready for a nap. She gently rocked him again, one hand patting his back in slow rhythm. "You got a name?" Elliot asked, finally lifting his eyes. Denise Rollins." He nodded. "I've seen it on the invoice, but we've never met." "No, you're usually not around." He gave a short, dry laugh. "Yeah, that checks out." She looked at him for a beat longer, then back down at Caleb. He was out cold now, breathing even, a little bubble forming at the corner of his mouth. Denise smiled faintly. "He's a good baby. He just needed someone to show up." But as Denise handed the sleeping child over, neither of them realized this wasn't going to be the last time they'd meet like this. Elliot took his son with the kind of clumsy care that made Denise instinctively keep her hands near, just in case. Caleb stirred a little, whimpered, then settled again once he felt the warmth of his father's chest. Elliot held him awkwardly, one arm under the baby's bottom, the other cradling his head, like he was holding something expensive he didn't know how to use. Denise didn't say anything. She just watched. "Do you do that with everyone's baby?" he asked, eyes still on his son. "Only the ones screaming in empty rooms," she replied. It wasn't meant to be sharp, but it landed that way. Elliot sat down in the rocker again. He rocked once, stiffly, like the chair might break if he didn't do it right. "I didn't know he was up here alone," he said. Denise stood a few feet away, hands folded in front of her. "You didn't know because you weren't supposed to be here today." "Right. Doesn't mean somebody else shouldn't have been." Elliot sighed, glancing toward the doorway. "That nanny's fired, effective immediately." "Maybe, but you still left your baby with her." He looked up sharply, caught off guard by her bluntness, but Denise didn't flinch. She wasn't being disrespectful, just honest. "I know I did," he said quietly. The room went still again. The air was thick, but not tense. Just real. "You said your son's 17? He asked after a moment. Denise nodded. "Rashawn. Lives with me, works part-time after school. Good kid. Better than I was at that age. How'd you manage? If you don't mind me asking." She gave a soft chuckle. "I minded at first. I minded being 19 and pregnant. I minded getting kicked out of my mama's house. I minded cleaning floors while my friends were out doing who knows what. But then he started saying, 'Mama,' and reaching for me when he was scared. And I stopped minding. I just figured it out." Elliot looked at her like he was trying to imagine that life. It didn't match the world he lived in. Private drivers, catered meals, digital calendars. He didn't know what figuring it out looked like without a team of consultants. I guess I've been avoiding it, he said. The crying, the diapers, the chaos. I thought if I could pay for help, I'd be helping him. Denise stepped closer. Her voice was steady. Paying for help is fine, but kids don't care about how much you spend. They care about who shows up. Elliot stared at the floor again. The baby shifted in his arms, letting out a tiny yawn. Denise moved toward the crib and pulled the blanket over it. She adjusted the mobile, which hadn't been turned on. The little plastic stars looked dusty. You need somebody real in this house, she said, not turning around. Not just hired hands. You volunteering? He asked. She paused. Not unless you're offering something more permanent than a mop and gloves. There was no sarcasm in her tone. No hopefulness either. Just plain words. Elliot didn't answer. He stood, still holding Caleb, who now slept like he had no memory of the panic from earlier. Would you sit for a while? Elliot asked, motioning to the cushioned chair across from him. I don't know what I'm doing. That kind of honesty wasn't what Denise expected. Not from a man like him. She nodded slowly and sat down. All right. They sat there in silence for a few seconds, both watching the sleeping baby, both thinking things they wouldn't say yet. You know, Elliot said, I built an app that predicts what kind of car someone will buy in 5 years based on their Spotify history. Denise smirked. What's it say about people who listen to gospel on Sunday and trap on Monday? Elliot chuckled. That they're unpredictable. The algorithm hates them. Denise leaned back. Sounds like a baby. He laughed again, this time genuinely. Caleb stirred, but didn't wake. You're funny, Elliot said. I wasn't trying to be. That's what makes it better. She smiled, just a little. But as easy as that moment felt, neither of them knew what it would cost to keep things that honest. Denise was back in the kitchen, not cleaning, just sitting at the counter with a glass of water, watching the baby monitor Elliot handed her like it was some kind of trophy. Caleb was still sleeping in the crib upstairs, peaceful, content. Elliot stood by the fridge, sipping coffee like he was waiting for something he couldn't name. You don't cook in here? Denise asked, glancing around the spotless, barely used kitchen. No time, he answered. I usually order out. You got 3 ovens, a wine fridge, and a walk-in pantry. All for takeout? Elliot chuckled. It impresses clients. She raised an eyebrow. What about impressing your son? He paused, fingers tapping against the coffee mug. He's 1. I don't think he cares about duck confit. He doesn't, but he'll care about who makes him grilled cheese when he's 5. That made Elliot go quiet again. The way Denise said it, like she wasn't trying to shame him, just show him, hit a little too close. He set the mug down and leaned on the counter across from her. You know what's messed up? He said. I built everything I ever wanted. This house, the company, the bank account. I never pictured it being this empty. Denise didn't blink. That's because you built it for a version of you that doesn't have to raise a baby. He looked up at her, startled by how true that felt. I'm not trying to tell you how to live, she added, but money doesn't fill rooms. People do. He nodded slowly. My wife used to say that. What was her name? Jasmine. She had this wild laugh, loud like she didn't care who was listening, used to dance in the kitchen even when there wasn't music. Denise smiled. She sounds real. She was, he said, quieter now. She was everything. I met her in grad school. She was studying early childhood development, wanted to open her own center for kids who couldn't afford daycare. And now? She didn't make it through childbirth. Complications. Denise's smile faded. I'm sorry. She never got to hold him. I think I've been angry about that since day one. Angry at the universe, at the hospital, at Caleb even, which is the worst part. Some days I look at him and all I see is what I lost. He swallowed hard, ashamed. Denise leaned forward, resting her elbows on the counter. You ever tell anyone that before? No. Well, now you did. They sat in that stillness for a moment. Not awkward, not heavy, just honest. Denise sipped her water again. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why do you leave so much? You've got money. You could take time. Elliot nodded slowly. I know, but work is the only place I still feel like I know what I'm doing. It's predictable. Code doesn't cry when you mess it up. People do. Denise tilted her head. You ever think that maybe your son doesn't need perfect? What do you mean? I mean, he just needs present. That one hit hard. Elliot ran a hand down his face and looked away, embarrassed. I've messed this up already, haven't I? No, Denise said. You're here now. That's more than a lot of kids get. He looked back at her. You're not what I expected. She smirked. I get that a lot. You make me feel like I don't know anything. Denise stood, grabbing her tote from the floor. That's a good start. Elliot followed her to the door. Do you need a ride home? She laughed. I took the bus. I'm fine. He hesitated, then asked, would you ever consider coming back? Not to clean, just to help. With the baby? With me? Denise looked him in the eye. That depends. On what? On whether you're asking for help or just trying to outsource your responsibility again. He didn't answer right away. I'm asking for help, he said finally. Real help. But even when someone asks the right way, accepting help isn't always simple, and giving it comes with its own risks. The next morning, Denise came back, not in uniform, no gloves, no cleaning supplies, just jeans, a simple top, and a light jacket. She looked around the foyer like she expected the baby's cries to come crashing down again, but today the house was different. Not louder, but not cold either. Elliot greeted her at the door, Caleb on his hip. The baby looked half awake, his curls sticking up on one side, pacifier barely hanging on. He's already been changed and fed, Elliot said, like a kid trying to impress the teacher. Denise raised a brow. Oh, so you know what you're doing now? Not really, he admitted, but I'm trying. She stepped in. The floor was still spotless, maybe even too spotless, like someone had tried to make up for months of absence in one night, but the air felt warmer, lived in, less showroom, more home. They sat in the living room. Elliot placed Caleb gently in the playpen and handed him a soft toy. Denise watched him. You slept? She asked. 4 hours, which is more than usual. Denise leaned back into the couch. You look like you've been through something. I have, he said, not even joking. Then came a pause, and without warning, Elliot started talking again. I had a dream last night. Jasmine was holding him, rocking him, singing that song she used to make up. The words didn't even rhyme, but she didn't care. He was laughing, and I just, watched. Denise didn't interrupt. When I woke up, I realized I've never heard him laugh like that. Not once. She nodded slowly. Then maybe it's time to give him something to laugh about. Elliot rubbed his hands together. I don't know if I'm built for this. None of us are. Not at first. You had Rashawn at 19, no help, no husband, and you made it. She turned to him. I made it because I stopped looking at what I didn't have and started paying attention to what I did. What'd you have? She smiled faintly. A baby who thought I was his whole world, and a job that barely paid the rent. But I showed up anyway, every day. Elliot nodded, looking toward Caleb. The baby was now chewing on the ear of a stuffed giraffe. You think he's going to remember these days? Elliot asked. Not with his brain, but yeah, with his body. He looked confused. She explained, babies remember how they were held, how safe they felt, how often somebody looked them in the eyes. That stuff sticks, even when they can't say it. Elliot leaned back, lost in thought. You know the first time I realized I was rich? She said suddenly. Elliot looked over. When? When Rashawn turned 7. I had $2 left after bills, literally 2, and he handed me this bent paper flower he made at school, told me he didn't need a toy because he had me. She smiled to herself. I felt like the richest woman alive. Elliot was quiet for a long time after that. Then, I'd trade half my net worth to feel that. Denise looked at him seriously. You don't have to trade anything. You just gotta show up. They sat there in the quiet again, Caleb giggling to himself in the background. Denise glanced at her watch. I should get going. Got another job in Mesa. Elliot stood up, walked her to the door. Wait, do you still do childcare, like, officially? She laughed. Officially, no, but I know how to love on a kid. I meant what I said yesterday. I need help, not just for Caleb, for me. Denise paused at the door. You sure about that? Because I don't play pretend. If I show up, I show up. Elliot looked her in the eye. I'm sure. But saying yes is one thing. Living up to that promise is a whole different kind of work. By the end of the second week, Denise had her own rhythm. She came 3 days a week, early enough to catch the sun rising behind the backyard palms, late enough to give Elliot time to try mornings on his own. Sometimes he'd be halfway through a bottle feeding when she arrived. Sometimes he'd still be in the shower, Caleb bouncing in a bouncer seat with cereal smeared on his chin. But no matter what, Denise showed up like clockwork. Today, she walked in to find the baby on the floor in a pile of toys and Elliot on the couch, a burp cloth over his shoulder, looking like he'd fought a war and barely survived. Denise dropped her bag and burst out laughing. You look like the baby spit up your soul. Elliot gave her a blank look. He did, twice. She stepped over a Lego and scooped Caleb into her arms. You used the wrong bottle again, huh? I thought it was the right one. It was blue. They're all blue, Elliot. He groaned into his hands. I don't know how you did this by yourself. I didn't have a choice, she said, bouncing Caleb gently. That'll teach you to keep thinking love makes it easier. Elliot smiled, just barely. No, but it makes it worth it. He said it without thinking, then looked up at her. Denise caught his gaze and held it for a beat longer than usual. It had been like that for days now. Soft looks, shared sighs, laughs that lasted just a second too long. Nothing romantic, not yet. But something was shifting. She broke the moment first. Let me make some tea before I fall asleep standing. She moved toward the kitchen. Elliot followed, standing in the doorway while she boiled water and rummaged through the cabinets like she lived there. You ever think about doing this full time? He asked suddenly. What? Parenting your kid? She teased. No, I mean being part of something here, not just helping me survive, but like staying. Making this a real partnership. Denise turned slowly. Her face didn't show surprise, but something quieter. Thoughtfulness. You mean like a job? No, I mean like family. That changed the air in the room. She leaned on the counter, arms crossed. Elliot, I'm not the kind of person you were expecting to build a life with. I didn't know what kind of person I needed until I saw you pick up my crying son without asking for permission. That's not love. That's instinct. It's both, he said softly. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned back to the kettle, poured the tea, and placed a cup in front of him. I'm not trying to replace anybody, she said. I don't want you to. I just want someone real. She nodded slowly. You sure? Because being real means sometimes I'll tell you things you don't want to hear. Like when your tone is off, or your ego's in the way, or your baby needs more than tech company stock options. He didn't flinch. I need that. She stepped closer. And what happens when your friends start asking why the cleaning lady is raising your kid? Then I tell them she was the first person who actually paid attention. Caleb, now in his high chair, let out a loud squeal and slapped his hand in a puddle of banana. Denise turned, smiling. Looks like we're being summoned. Elliot picked up a napkin and started cleaning. Team effort? Always. But even in moments that feel settled, life has a way of testing whether people mean what they say or just like how it sounds. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. Denise was waiting for the dryer to finish. Caleb was napping. Elliot was at a meeting across town. Everything felt still until her phone rang. It was Rashawn's school. Fights in the parking lot. Someone tried to jump him. He was fine, shaken, but fine. Denise's chest tightened as she grabbed her keys and left a note on the counter. Had to go, call me. An hour later, she was back at her own front porch, holding her son tight. 17 and taller than her, but in that moment, he was still her baby. I'm good, Ma, Rashawn said. It's handled. Denise didn't let go right away. She kissed his cheek and whispered, You better be. She made him a sandwich, and they sat in silence, watching reruns on a beat-up couch that sagged in the middle. This was home. The old carpet, the too small kitchen, the framed photo of him at age 9, tooth missing, holding a spelling bee trophy. Denise had built this life from scratch, and part of her wasn't sure if she could walk away from it. That night, back at the big house, she found Elliot pacing. "Is everything okay?" he asked. "Now it is." She told him everything, not in a dramatic way, just honestly. "My son needed me. I was there." Elliot rubbed the back of his neck. "I'm sorry. You should have called me. I could have helped." She shook her head. It wasn't about help. It was about history. He didn't argue, just listened. "I've been thinking," she said, "about what you asked, about staying, being part of this." "And?" Denise looked around. The house was no longer a stranger. Caleb's toys were everywhere. The couch had a juice stain. The once perfect rug was now curled at the corner from being stepped on too many times. It looked lived in, and more than that, it looked loved. "I can't move in right now," she said. "Rashawn's got one more year of high school. I need to be home." Elliot nodded, eyes cast downward. "But," she continued, "I'll still show up. I'll still love this boy. And if we keep building this the right way, then maybe one day we figure the rest out." Elliot looked up, hope in his eyes. "I just don't want to lose this," he said quietly. "You won't," she replied, "as long as you don't forget how you got it." He reached over, squeezed her hand. They sat like that for a while. Nothing grand, nothing fancy. Just two people who had been strangers a month ago, now holding something fragile and real between them. The baby monitor buzzed. Caleb was up. Elliot stood to get him, but Denise beat him to it. She picked the baby up from the crib, held him against her chest. He cooed, tugging at her hoop earring. "You love her, don't you?" Elliot whispered to his son from the doorway. Caleb let out a soft giggle. Denise turned and smiled. "Told you, kids remember who shows up." Elliot stepped closer, kissed the top of his son's head. Then he looked at her. "I used to think rich meant money in the bank. Now I think it's this. People, moments, not missing the good stuff." "You're learning," she said. They all sat in the rocker together, the baby in the middle, the night soft around them. No contracts, no guarantees, just presence, just love. Because sometimes the richest people aren't the ones with the most money. They're the ones who finally show up and do the work love requires. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs a reminder that showing up can change everything. And don't forget to subscribe for more real human stories that stick with you.